Hello, I hear you.
I'm going to turn on the programming, okay?
Yep. Let's start. Okay, we're getting
Lawyer
ready.
to close your housing transaction, or need a compassionate family lawyer who can help you get through a separation or divorce, KPA will have the right lawyer for you. KPA is not like some other law firms that just refer your case to another company. All of our legal services are performed in-house by our team of experienced and knowledgeable lawyers. Learn more and book an appointment online by visiting us at kpalawyers.ca. You can also call 905-965-6263 between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday to Friday. Once again, our website is kpalawyers.ca and our phone number is 905-965-6263.
Attention all runners. We know 2020 has been a challenging year, but we have some good news for you. Registration is now open for the 2021 Feature Mind, Body, and Soul Run With Us as we take to the streets May the 1st and 2nd, 2021. Featuring some of Mississauga's most picturesque communities and stunning waterfront, this year's event features a full marathon, half marathon, two runners looking to get their feet wet. Sign up today at MississaugaMarathon.com.
In the ever-changing landscape of professional sports leagues, schedules, and availability, there is one constant: sports interaction. Canada's favorite online sports book. Never game, the latest odds, or in-game prize sports. Golf, and don't forget upcoming games in the NBA and NHL. At home or on the go, for action on every sport, on every game, anywhere you want to play. Make the call with Sports Interaction, Canada's online sports book. Brought to you by Mohawk Online in Canada. Players must be 19 or over. Play responsibly at Sports Interaction.
The views expressed in the following program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of Saga 960 AM or its management.
From the treaty lands and the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, you're listening to Peel Matters.
My pension can barely cover my groceries and medication. What should I do?
I just arrived in Canada. How can I get support?
My partner's entire paycheck goes to childcare. Is this normal?
Why are house prices so high here compared to the rest of the GTA?
Who are some local artists?
As a Black person, can I rely on the police for help?
And welcome to Peel Matters. I'm your host, Ryan Gercharn. And for the next hour, we're going to dive into what is going on around the world. I mean, a lot of shows I've done is always focused on Peel right here in Ontario. And a lot of us who live here come from different places, have backgrounds around the world. So I've decided to, hey, let's take a look at what's going on, because there is a lot going on. First off, I want to start off in South America, Venezuela. Pablo Vivanco, who is a board member of the Canadian Latin American Alliance and a journalist, is here to tell us, Pablo, what is actually happening in Venezuela? That's a big question.
It's a huge question. Thanks for having me on, Ryan, and for inviting Canadian Latin American Alliance to speak a little bit about this. Well, I'll try to summarize a lot in as a bit of a concise format as possible. Venezuela is a country of 20-something, 30 million people or so, and it is the most oil-dependent country in the region, right? And that says a lot, because there's a lot of pretty oil-dependent countries. That is, countries that rely heavily on income from selling the oil that they produce in their country, that they take out of the soil in their country. Venezuela is the most reliant, something like 90% of its income from foreign exports is based on oil. So, folks will probably remember that a few years ago, 2004, 2005, world oil prices plummeted. And that ended up, kind of causing a severe economic crisis in this country, precisely because it's been so historically heavily oil dependent. This kind of culminated with escalating political tensions and crisis in the country. I can go through some of that. I'll save that for a bit.
Yeah.
But basically, I mean, the crisis has continued. It has worsened in certain regards for a number of different reasons, including most recently over the last couple of years, a pretty significant sanctions regime from the United States government and other governments, which have worsened the situation there. Also, since 2018, the United States, Canada, and a number of other countries have refused to recognize the Venezuelan president as the president, and instead have said that another person, a legislator that was elected to be the head of their National Assembly, kind of our House of Commons, they're recognizing him as the country's leader. And as a result, Venezuela, if anybody's been to the United States, you may have gone and filled up your car in a Citgo. Citgo is actually owned by Venezuela, by their oil company. A lot of those assets have actually been seized in the United States by the United States government, and basically, so it's further depriving that country of the income it needs. One of the other parts of actually being so oil dependent is that you end up actually paying for a lot of imports that people for even the basic foodstuffs. So anyway, a lot of these things have kind of mounted on each other, and as a result, a significant number of Venezuelans have left the country over the last few years, particularly in the time period that I mentioned after 2004.
Yeah.
Most of whom have gone to South American countries, but also some to Canada and the United States.
Yeah, no, and we're seeing a lot of the mass migration. We're seeing conditions. I just learned this recently that used to gas up your car for free in Venezuela. Now people are asking for pay. Like you have to actually pay to get gas. The hospitals are like over capacity, and that's like way beyond over capacity. The food crisis, like you were mentioning, economic. So how did we get to this point that's happening right now, and amidst a pandemic, no less? How did we get here?
Yeah, so like I said, a lot of these problems kind of begin with this historic dependency that the country has had on its oil, right? This isn't something that's over the last 10, 20, this is like, how Venezuela has been for most of the 20th century, and that didn't change in the 21st century, in spite of, a government that came in, ushering in what they called a revolution. A lot changed in the country, but that certain part of it stayed the same. With regards to it's a very difficult sort of a thing to try to explain to people from outside, like what you said, for example, the whole thing of filling up your car for free. It wasn't free, but you'd go and fill up a tank for maybe 10 cents, the equivalent of that, a very negligible amount of money. And as the country has experienced hyperinflation, and aside from that, some people may be familiar with the concept of hyperinflation. It's when, basically the currency that you use, it ends up losing actual sort of value in an exchange. So you end up having to, spend a lot more for the same thing. That's happened in Venezuela, but at the same time, and this is where it changes from day to day, because there's also all kinds of street speculation of foodstuffs that is probably the bigger issue, right? When I speak to my friends in Venezuela, which I was speaking to folks today, because there's actually elections happening this weekend. I'm speaking to another friend of mine right now who's trying to move from Caracas to La Guaira. La Guaira is, if you ever fly to Caracas, La Guaira is where the airport is, has to go to a family emergency. And, she's trying to get some transport to go there, doesn't want to take the bus, wants to take a taxi. She doesn't know how much it is, because the price of last week could have changed to this week based on, what street speculators are exchanging the dollar for. Again, all of that exists precisely because of the fact that they're an oil-dependent, oil-exporting country, right? Like, so that's why it's difficult for us to, kind of understand all those things because, we don't have to go on the street to exchange, a Canadian dollar for a US dollar, right? Which is, kind of a reality in that country, especially over the last couple of years.
So I guess you mentioned earlier that you hinted at least towards the political aspect of this. How does that play out? You were mentioning that an elected president is not being recognized by, you're saying, the United States and other countries. They're pushing on. Why is this happening? How did this even come to be?
Sure. And again, trying to summarize 20 years, probably even more than that.
Yeah, of course.
In 1999, somebody who people may have heard of, Hugo Chavez, was elected as the president of the country. And he began what they call the Bolivarian Revolution. So this is already a very polarized country in the sense of a very, very harsh class divide, right? Like anybody who's gone to Caracas, has kind of gone around. You see that there's areas where there's rich and there's areas where there's very poor people, right? Barrios or favelas, or depending on which country you're from. So he came in on the idea that the country had a historic debt to the majority of the people who are majority poor, humble, working class people. So as takes place in most of Latin America, anytime there's a political movement, somebody elected that tries to come in and change the economics to make things a little bit more equal, it ends up kind of creating a bit of a backlash from the people who have historically led the country and the people who kind of have concentrations of wealth and power, right? So this happened in Venezuela. So as a result, in spite of the fact that, it was elected, by significant amounts of people, you had a very vibrant democracy, like huge participation rates, like 80-something% of people participating in elections. The elections were never recognized by the opposition parties, the ones who had traditionally governed and had actually governed unstopped for about 40 years. They had a pact between them that they would basically change power. So they got voted out of office. Chavez and his revolution came in, but they started making changes to the economy. The situation developing that way. When Chavez died in 2013, he died while he was in office, a few months after he'd been elected again. His vice president at that time, Nicolas Maduro, ended up winning the next elections by a very slim majority. It was only about 300,000 votes that he won by. As a result, again, the opposition did not recognize the elections. This resulted in political violence. Eventually that subsided, but then this economic crisis that I talked about kind of came into play, and the situation has kind of escalated since then. What the most recent thing that happened in terms of what I refer to in not recognizing Maduro as president is in 2018, the Venezuela held another presidential election in which the Venezuela held another election which was not recognized by the U.S. government. It was not recognized by a number of other governments. So the person that had been put as the head of the National Assembly, which at this point was dominated by opposition people, a young man named Juan Guaido, he was now recognized. He became recognized by the United States, by Canada, by a number of other countries as the president, them citing a specific article in Venezuela's constitution, all kinds of, rigmaroles and machinations. Just basically, they don't want to recognize Maduro. They wanted to recognize this other guy, found an excuse for it. Throughout this entire process, like I said, these countries have been seizing Venezuela's assets, trying to put it under the control of Guaido and company. But obviously, Guaido does not control any of the state institutions. There's going to be an election happening a few days from now on Sunday, more national legislative elections. So, for their version of the House of Commons, and Guaido and his party have boycotted. So the elections are going to continue. They're not going to be represented, and then this situation is going to continue. At the end of the day, who's really kind of suffering from all this are regular Venezuelan people, right? Because, like you said, all of those sanctions have continued throughout this entire pandemic, right? So the situation, in spite of calls from the United Nations, in spite of calls from a number of different quarters from around the world, trying to pressure the United States and other countries to lift sanctions from countries that are currently under sanctions, right? It isn't just Venezuela, but obviously the entire point of sanctions are to try to kind of squeeze a country, to squeeze an economy as much as possible. So the people that pay for this are always going to be just regular people. And this has been the experience, right? Like when Iraq was under sanctions in the 1990s, there were reports that came out about upwards of 1 million people, dying as a result of the consequences of those sanctions. More recently, in the case of Venezuela, former Nobel Prize winning economist Jeffrey Sachs produced a report saying that since 2007, somewhere around 40,000 people in Venezuela could have died as a result of the sanctions and the sort of things that the country has been deprived of because of those sanctions. So those of us who are part of the Canadian Latin American Alliance, Latin Americans, from different countries, including Venezuelans, we've been concerned to see that Ottawa has been not only dovetailing the positions of Washington, which I think lots of people, especially in Canada, are not going to be necessarily surprised to hear that Washington is trying to meddle into another country's affairs and and having disastrous consequences as a result. But we're very alarmed to see Canada not only dovetailing and playing that role, but playing a leadership role. Canada has been one of the main leaders in this thing called the Lima Group, which is one of this group of countries from the region that have been trying to push for some form of regime change in Venezuela. So they're the ones that have been trying to promote Guaido and his supposed parallel government. But again, none of that has been constructive. All of that has been, frankly, ill-informed with a very bad basis to it. It sends very bad signals for what our government is doing in the world, and especially right now, has only contributed to the suffering of the majority of Venezuelan people.
Why is there a push this other regime?
Which one? Is there a push to remove Maduro, or why is there a push? Push to. Yeah. So this isn't new, right? There was an attempted coup against Chavez, before he had finished his first mandate. At that point, George W. Bush. George W. Bush was president. And the U.S. government was very involved in supporting that coup against Chavez, and this was 2002. And basically, from there on, there's been millions of dollars pumped into Venezuelan opposition groups. Ultimately, this is one of the world's largest oil producers. It's got the world's largest recognized deposits, like reserves of oil, right, in the world, right, even more than Saudi Arabia. So, I know that oil is potentially on its way out, but right now, today, it's still a very valuable commodity in the economy, right? So the countries who control it, or the countries who have it, are obviously going to play an important geopolitical role, an important sort of economic role in the way that the world is right now. And beyond that, right, and especially within the region, having another sort of model, another example that is different from the model that's been tried to impose in the region, which that model, if I apologize for throwing out terms, but a neoliberal model, so like a market-oriented model, that's been the thing that's been pushed on the region since the late 80s, early 90s, as this is what you got to follow. So when a country doesn't do that, it sets a bad example, right? So this latest push against Maduro and the excuses that they made around what were, perhaps some irregularities or some things in the last elections as the excuse for not recognizing this government is precisely that. Like, I mean, they've been looking for an excuse for over 20 years to not recognize Venezuela's government, to delegitimize it. And obviously, the country has fallen into crisis because of the economic model that they inherited and unfortunately didn't change much. And as a result, all those things have just kind of accumulated. The opportunity came up. We're not going to recognize this government, put this guy in, see if we can get him out and get this guy in, but that hasn't happened, right? And so these elections are coming up on Sunday. Those parties that are associated with Guaido are going to be completely wiped off the map, and that's because they decided not to participate, right? There's close to another 100 opposition groups which are participating in the elections, but the U.S. has even started to sanction them, So this is where the situation where our country, Canada, right now is going along with a really unconstructive and I would really say destructive position and role in the region and specifically in a country like Venezuela.
So we are running a bit on time right here. So I just wanted to get, just before we go, tell me a bit more about you said the Canadian Latin American Alliance. What sort of, I guess, advocacy are you doing here to really push for a push against what I guess the Trudeau government is doing right now?
Well,
how
first
do
of all,
people get involved is the second part to that.
So our website is claa.ca. You can get some more information there, and we're focused on trying to highlight, what the specific role of our government is in the region, what role it is playing, and where possible, interacting with, trying to educate even lawmakers, because frankly, I think a lot of lawmakers are not really all that sure are not really sure what role Canada is playing in the region. Even probably people within the Liberal Party itself, right? Backbenchers and whatnot. They don't know what's actually happening. So we've only been around for a few months, precisely because we were concerned around the positions that Canada took last year when there was a very obvious coup d'etat in Bolivia, and Canada basically went along with it and started very quickly recognized a government that was comprised of, that was put there by military people and police officers who told the elected president to leave, right? So that's not the sort of Canada we want to see in the region or in the world. That's not the role that we think our government should be playing in the region or the world. So, us as Canadians and also as Latin Americans, we want to ensure that we're doing what we can to inform people and to interact with our elected officials, to try to educate them and have them switch their position, hold our government to account.
Perfect. Pablo, we have run out of time and we have to go, but I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about this. After the elections, I'll definitely want to have you come back and keep us up to date on what's going on over there. That was Pablo Vivanco from the Canadian Latin American Alliance, and we just got a Venezuela 101. Stay tuned when we take a break. When we come back, there are protests happening in India, and we're going to talk about that. I have a few folks ready to go, so stay tuned right here on News Talk Saga 960 AM.
The Peel Art Gallery, Museum and Archives, also known as PAMA, is pleased to partner with Caribbean Art Fair, Black Artists Network and Dialogue, and guest curators Karen Carter and Greg Manuel to present When Night Stirred at Sea, Contemporary Caribbean Art. This exhibit aims to connect Caribbean artists to the broader art world and includes local and international talent, including Brampton's own Janice Reed. The exhibit right now is open virtually and eventually on site once PAMA is able to open to the public. For more information, please visit pama.peelregion.ca.
Help make the holidays bright for a child in the community with a donation to the CHCH Christmas Toy Drive. You're invited to bring a new unwrapped gift now through December 18th to the CHCH studio. Drop-offs can be made made on Wednesdays or Saturdays between the hours of 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. Safe practices will be in place. We thank you for your generosity. Please visit chch.com for details, participating partners, and donation options.
Here are 5 reasons to sign the Dear Everybody agreement.
Because you haven't heard a voice like mine on the radio before.
Because when's the last time you saw a dancer with a disability in a music video?
Because some stages don't even have a wheelchair ramp.
Because you love watching sledge hockey. Trust me.
Because you'll be less awkward around me.
It's time to include disability in the picture.
Sign Holland Blueview's Dear Everybody agreement at deareverybody.ca and help create a world without stigma for kids and youth with disabilities.
Are you looking for a way to make a difference in your business? Check out your local Board of Trade or Chamber of Commerce. These community-based business organizations are positioned to help your business in many ways. They are the voice of business that advocate for you every day at all levels of government. They give you access to business associates, government officials, and a host of programs designed to boost your bottom line. For more information, call the Mississauga Board of Trade at 905-273-6151 or visit online at www.mbot.com.
No radio? No problem. Stream us live on saga960am.ca.
This is Peel Matters, answering questions that matter to you.
And we are back here on News Talk Saga 960 AM Peel Matters. This hour, we are talking about what's happening around the world. We heard earlier from Pablo about what's happening in Venezuela. And now, I don't know if you've noticed, but there have been some protests here in Ontario and North America about something that's happening in India. And here to tell us about this is Manpreet Kaur Deol, political and community organizer. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And we have Darshan Patel, who has tons of amazing content on his TikTok. And it's so informative. I know people are like, you have a TikTok influencer here? Yeah, I do. Thank you, Darshan, all the way from Arizona, is it?
Atlanta.
I know it was an A1. I couldn't.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. So let's start with you, Darshan. What has happened? I know you spoke about this on your TikTok. If you could just give us a brief, rundown. What's happening right now with the protest in India? What is this about?
So right now the farmers are protesting on the streets. At the base level, it just seems like they're just protesting over some like small regulations that have been made or some rules that have been made. But if you look deeper into it, it's a bit more than just them being like taken out from the regulations. It's the fact that India is moving more towards privatizing their farming industry, and so now the entire agriculture industry is like kind of shaken up because there was already problems there from before, and they were asking for some help to fix the problems, and now those problems have become worse. So the problems before were with middlemen in the APMC market that they had, and these middlemen would basically, like, the farmer would go to the market to sell their product, but they needed a way to regulate like the pricing. They need to regulate everything that where to sell, how to sell it, managing like transportation. So there was all these middlemen that came in through this APMC. And so the whole point was that
APMC means what?
It's the agricultural products. I'm not by a computer. It's the agriculture committee of India.
Okay.
And so what ended up happening is that the middlemen ended up taking up more money from the products that the farmers made than the farmers themselves. So this exploitation was happening, and they were trying to get rid of that. And in the process, these new bills came out, which take away the regulation that the APMC and the Mandi had over the farmers in India. And so the farmers don't have to go to the APMC markets like the Mandis anymore to sell their products. They can go directly to companies and the people. And so that's going deeper into the bills. I'm not sure if you like trying to get that far.
Yeah,
right now.
no, this is I would love to like really get a sense, and if tell me a bit about the bill, because I think it is.
Yeah, just let me know what you want to talk about, like, because I'm just gonna.
No, you're totally fine. Actually, you know what? Before you get to the bill, why don't I have Manpreet just jump in here? Manpreet, what's your take on what's going on right now?
Well,
like Darshan said, the farmers are protesting against three laws that will, remove many rights and economic securities that the farmers have under the current system. And basically, it will destroy farming communities. It will force farmers to depend on corporations and private firms. And it will essentially push farmers more into debt. And, they'll be forced to sell their livelihoods to large private businesses and corporations. And it will further increase the already alarming rates of farmer suicides. I think the stats are that, I think I have the stats here. It's like 94 farmer suicides have been due to death, and they've been continually increasing. And with the recent attacks on the farmers, they're being reported in media. We've all seen them. There's been protests happening in Vancouver, here in where I live in Toronto. And there's just genuine fears that there'll be more violence by the Indian state against peaceful protests. And it's estimated that there's around 12 million folks from different reports that are on the ground right now, literally fighting for their livelihoods, right? So and if you look at it, Ryan, it's not just this hasn't emerged just from this year or so on. This has been decades of genocidal violence that took place in Punjab and it's been a consequence of the 1970 Punjab farmers movement. That's what we know now as the Sikh genocide. And what they're doing essentially is it's a peaceful protest. I don't know if you've seen, there's this image of, I believe, there's like a policeman swinging a baton at an elderly Sikh man. That's become kind of, I think, the defining image of what's happening in Delhi right now, because it's like I said, these protesters have faced state violence in their march towards an unjust laws, essentially.
And you talked a lot about the effects of what's happening, like the mental health, the protests around the world. And I want to come back to, why are we talking about this? Why is it relevant to talk about here in North America when it's happening all the way halfway around the world? But before we get to that, I want to go back to Darshan. Darshan, talk about the meat of the bill. Like, why did this even have to come about? Like, you know what I mean? What was the history behind this?
Yeah.
Why are we here?
So after India became India, right, in 1947, like all these different segments of like India's economy had become their own like grouping. So that's where we have like the APMC form, the Agricultural Committee, that had come into place. I'm not like a historian or anything. I don't know the whole like full detailed names, but I can like point you in the right direction of what's going on here. So these committees were created to help regulate like the farming industry, how to like sell the crops, like how to move it around and stuff like that. And through that, like through a span of like 30, 40 years, that literally like led to a lot of exploitation towards the farmers, where farmers were given an MSP, right? Minimum support price. And that's like a rule. But turns out that a lot of these farmers were getting paid under the MSP, like from the get-go, even with the whole MSP, with the whole MSP, I mean, APMC system, the Mandi system in place. The Mandi is supposed to support the farmers from this exploitation, but only about 7%, 10 to 7% of the farmers were actually getting MSP prices. The rest were getting prices under that, because all the middlemen in between were taking up, they all needed their cut. So the bill takes away that entire system, saying that the farmer doesn't have to deal with those people anymore. They can go directly to companies, they can go directly to the market. But now here comes the second problem, the second part of the second bill. The second bill says that anytime a farmer wants to sell something to a company or anyone, they have to go into a contract. Now that's not a bad thing. That's a pretty good thing, right? But this is a farmer dealing directly with like an executive, like a company. Like it's like these are not farmers that have like acres and acres of land. So most of these farmers are pretty independent. They have like 1 or 2 acres of land. Like they grow some crops, they go sell it into like the local markets, and that's it. Now they have to go and deal with people like Big Bazaar or like Reliance, who's trying to create their own corporate like markets. And so now they have to go deal with them. Without an MSP, these companies, they can just come in and say that, hey, Yeah, I know that the banana costs about 6 rupees, like minimum in the MSP, but there's no MSP anywhere. So they can literally say that, hey, since I'm buying all my bananas from you on this entire like 1 acre of land, I'm just gonna put a flat price on it, and it could end up being a lot lower than 6 rupees per banana. It'll be like 2 rupees or 1 rupee per banana. And so
that's exactly what's going to happen.
that's exactly, yeah. So that's what's happening, and a lot right now. What like recent couple of days ago, what the Modi government, or I don't want to call it the Modi government. It's BJP run by like Amit Shah, and like that's a really messed up situation. But they're trying to come out and say that we'll have a talk. You know, like we'll talk about this MSP situation. So there's a lot of people in the media and saying that MSP is not going away and not going away, but where? You know, where is it written? Because you've written that you're taking away APMC regulation, and that means that the middlemen that create the MSP are not there anymore. So where is the MSP? You know? So it's a loophole. It's not written, and they're saying that's not written, but we know it's because someone else does it. So the contract really screws them over because there's no MSP. What we're asking for the second part of the bill is have some sort of price protection, something to have price protection, something that minimum, like they have to have minimum on this. And the problem with this, like this little price protection problem, comes in the third bill, because a lot of us have been focusing on the first and the second one, saying that they privatize business and the farmers don't have to they have to deal with the companies now. But the third bill says that the produce that farmers produce, a lot of the produce like onions and potatoes and grains and stuff like that, they're essential, right? So at any time, if there's war, famine, anything going on in the world, anytime, they're essential items. So they cannot have like any type of price gouging. The prices cannot fluctuate. Those items, they have to stay like at a certain price level. Now these items like the onions and the potatoes and all that, they're non-essential. That means that the companies that are selling them could sell them at prices that are about 150 to 200% more than the original price of itself. So if the farmer is getting to sell the potato for 4 rupees, then the company can sell for 8. And with this bill, because it's not essential now, they can also create artificial demand by holding on to certain goods and letting go of certain goods. When this happens with corporations, who takes the fall? It's the farmer, because the farmer has to create the goods. When there's a demand, there's a high demand in potatoes, the farmer has to put in more work to grow more potatoes. However, because he has a contract, he's already on a set price, he cannot demand for more work. So now his cultivation price has gone up and the money that he's making in return has gone down. So he has a very small margin, and a lot of farmers fall into this little problem. They're going to fall into this problem, and like it's going to further their debt that they're already in.
Interesting. Let's talk about. So that's the background of the bills. I'm just wondering, why are we seeing protests here in North America and not just India?
So, sorry, you mean not just India? Oh, like, why are we seeing them here?
Yeah, well, around the world, actually, yeah.
Well, Canadians are worried, Ari, and rightfully so, because many of our families remain caretakers of land in Punjab. Like I've had tons of family, and I actually have friends that are at the protests in India right now. And so there's serious economic implications for Canada, of course. Many of our families, including mine, rely on revenue generated from the agriculture sector and inject it directly into the Canadian economy. So, the diaspora community has direct family involved in these protests, and the right of protest obviously is, as we know, is central to any economy. India has had a very poor track record in dealing with minorities and the political dissent. And I'm a political minority myself, being a Sikh. And furthermore, if you're talking about particularly just Modi, he really can't just expect the diaspora or the international community, so the Canada here, the UK, he can't expect us to be silent, because lately, India has regularly commented on internal affairs of other countries like Pakistan or China and whatnot. So, he recently endorsed Trump when he was running for the election. So you really can't expect the community, the millions of sick Canadians that are here or in the UK, can't expect them to be quiet. And we've had, as we know, we've had a lot of our political leaders, the prime minister and obviously all level of governments, they have raised concerns, and they have spoken about this violence that's taken place. So it's something that's we're directly involved in, and it's directly affecting us and our families.
So I guess my next question, let's start off with Darshan. Where are we going to see this go? Like after the protests are happening, what do we expect to see happen next?
So I want to back onto the last question as well that you had at Manpreet real quick. I think one of the problems, I'll get onto that one as well. One of the things that happened was that the Indian media is suppressing all the coverage of this, all the protests happening until it's the last minute, because the protests have been happening since September. And I remember distinctly that there was a very important meeting that they were holding in September 23rd, something like that. And on that day, they needed coverage. The farmers were on the streets and they needed coverage. But during that time, Deepika and Shraddha Kapoor were called in by the NCB. So the only news that was running on live was whatever's going on with the NCB and drugs in Bollywood and stuff like that. And the farmers got zero coverage. And they've been they've been using this entire Sushant's case and Bollywood case in India as a cover up to not talk about half these things that are happening.
Yeah,
and so
and you're absolutely right. This is actually happened. Obviously we've got this more awareness of this later in November, but farmers have actually been marching towards Delhi since September, and there's been no coverage, and the only coverage that's been happening is probably via social media.
And now that it became violent, it's become now they're throwing tear gas and water cannons. That's when they're covering it on the news. And what are they covering? There's half of the news is saying, oh, these people are extremists. They're terrorists. How can you say that about the people that feed you? You got to be
and ultimately it's about feeding the nation, but ultimately it's a question about they're not doing anything wrong. It's in the democracy to peacefully protest. And just talking about the water and the tear gas, it's so funny because they fired tons of water in December when it's winter in India from these water cannons on farmers who have the worst hit every year by India's national water crisis. And yet again you see just days later, you see these farmers offering these policemen water. So it's how do you, when you're speaking about this national water crisis and you're saying there's not enough water to feed their crops, but you're literally attacking them by that same water, it's hurtful. It's hurtful to us. It's hurtful directly, involved to our families that live there.
Most of our families, I'm a Patel, most of my family is farming family. We made it out to America because our grandfathers were farmers. So it's it does mean something. But moving along to your next question on what's going to happen next, I think this what happened, this situation that's happened is kind of it's a classic move that the Modi government has been pushing out. They do this thing where they're going to make a decision and then they'll just put it out there, and then they'll wait for the chaos to erupt, and then out of that chaos they'll fine tune what they need to fix. They have this mentality of just putting out the problem first. They're same thing when they demonetized the bills, or even when they went to lockdown, it was literally within 24 hours he's all right, we're gonna do this, and the whole country goes into chaos, and then they'll try to manage it afterwards. So that's what they did here. They literally just signed the bill in the middle of this entire Bollywood case that's going on, in the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of all this. For it's not the farmers weren't struggling already, because I covered this back in I think May. They had there was a whole plague. There's a locust plague that happened, that there was locusts eating up half the farmers crops in different parts of the region, because it was just dry. And they were already struggling because they're yielding half their 50% of their crops that they're actually supposed to be yielding. So they're already in a crisis. And so in the middle of all this crisis, they just drop a bill. And so chaos erupted. And now after 2 months, literally a week ago, they decided that we're going to have some talks. We'll talk about it. And so now they're holding a meeting, I think later this month or so. And so we'll see what happens. But
They're trying to just do some damage control.
Yeah, that's literally what they've been doing.
Where does that sound familiar, huh? In the Ford government here, where I live, they just act like that and they don't think things through, don't prepare, and everything because of the chaos. Speaking of chaos, I want to thank you folks because when we come back, we're going to talk about Darshan's going to stay on. We're going to talk about what's happening in Yemen and some really serious stuff happening there. I want to thank you, Manpreet Kaur, and thank you for joining us in this discussion. We are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, let's find out a bit more about what's happening in Yemen. Stay tuned right here on News Talk Saga 960 AM.
Attention all runners. We know 2020 has been a challenging year, but we have some good news for you. Registration is now open for the 2021 Mississauga Marathon. A great way to get out and feed your mind, body, and soul. Run with us as we take to the streets May the 1st and 2nd, 2021. Featuring some of Mississauga's most picturesque communities and stunning waterfront, this year's event features a full marathon, half marathon, 10K, 5K, 2K, and relays. The perfect event for seasonal runners looking to challenge their personal best or new runners looking to get their feet wet. Sign up today at MississaugaMarathon.com.
At Pump Hospitality Group, we're so fortunate to be part of a great community with amazing customers and partners such as News Talk Saga 960 AM. Mississauga, you've been there for us during the public health measures. And while we're restricted to providing takeout and delivery for now, we'll continue to be here for you with all your faves. Check out our menu online for your Pump restaurant of your choice. And when you're ready, give us a call or order online at pumphousegrillcompany.com, aaronmillspump.com, clarksonpump.com, or papagiuseppe's.com. And now, just launching, visit www.shopthepump.com and check out amazing pump gear such as t-shirts, toques, glassware, beverages, and even amazing grocery bundles. So take care, everyone, and be safe. In the ever-changing landscape of professional sports leagues, schedules, and availability, there is one constant: sports interaction. Canada's favorite online sports book. Never miss a game, the latest odds or in-game pricing, all the NFL, NCAA sports, golf, and don't forget, upcoming games in the NBA and NHL. At home or on the go, for action on every sport, on every game, anywhere you want to play. Make the call with Sports Interaction, Canada's online sports book. Brought to you by Mohawk Online in Canada. Players must be 19 or over. Play responsibly at Sports Interaction.
As the holidays approach again this year, there's no better time to reflect on the impact COVID-19 has had on all our communities. Dependency on food banks continues to increase, and the need to support our communities has never been greater. Please join us if you can, Saturday, December 12th, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. at the 3rd Annual Streetsville Christmas Breakfast in benefit of Eden Food for Change. This event is one of the 'Twas the Bite Before Christmas series. This year will be the first ever contactless outdoor drive-through curbside pickup experience from the parking lot of Drake, a Firkin Pub, Derry Road and Mississauga Road. Visit www.streetsville.org to pre-order a hot breakfast and select your pickup time to ensure physical distancing can be respected. Thanks for generous in-kind donations and volunteer support. 100% of the proceeds will benefit the charity Eden Food for Change. For more details of this worthy annual tradition, visit us at www.streetsville.org. That's www.streetsville.org.
Stream us live at saga960am.ca.
This is Peel Matters, answering questions that matter to you.
And welcome back here to Peel Matters. I'm your host, Brian Gercharn, and we are talking about various issues happening around the world. We spoke earlier with the Canadian Latin American Association, and Pablo, board member there, was telling us a little bit about Venezuela. And just recently, just before the break, we were talking about the farmers' protest that is happening in India. And joining me for this discussion from the previous segment, Darshan Patel, thank you for staying on. Like I said, you've done a lot of informative TikTok videos. I still have yet to see more dancing. I think that's what we need to see. You haven't
Look. Once I get this straight, my foot straight, we'll get some dancing videos in.
All right. Priorities, I get it. You did a lot of stuff, videos and informative ones on Yemen. Yemen right now is one of the top biggest humanitarian crisis situation in the world. 24 million people as of right now are in need of humanitarian assistance. Darshan, why? What is going on there?
So it all started with, we can keep digging it back and back, but it's war. The root of it would be war. That there's war happening in the Middle East, and there's a lot of money being extracted from neighboring countries, and they've been using Yemen territory for whatever's going on. That's a very vague way to put it, because this has been going on since 1990s. So if you can go back to like Desert Storm and stuff like that, when US went into war with Iraq against Saddam Hussein. During that time, there's a lot of like UAE, Saudi Arabia, and all. They took allegiance to like America against Saddam Hussein, and that caused some problems. And like through that entire like trickling down, we got the Yemeni civil war that happened. And after the Yemeni civil war, I think the main problem happened with Yemen is in 2014 when their government, there was a authoritarian dictator, I guess, authoritarian leader that was in power for about 33 years, and he got taken down by the Houthi movement. It was like a rebellion group, and in the beginning, a lot of the Yemeni like citizens were actually in support of the movement, because they're like, oh, they helped us like at least get rid of like the authoritarian government that we had so far. But like as time went on, they're waiting for a transition period that, hey, once this guy is out, like the third authoritarian that they already had, and we put a new guy in, we can actually get like a new wave going in Yemen. But that entire transition period got hijacked by this group, the militia group, the Houthi, and they've basically taken over a lot of like the mainland of Yemen, the capital city of Yemen, and they've gained a lot of the control. So they've basically they've neutralized like a lot of the area. It's almost like it's not like a war zone, but it's pretty bad. And one of the main reasons why is that Yemen is one of the I think it's the second largest country in that peninsula, the Arabian Peninsula, but it is the opening to like the ports. Like if any ship from any country wants to get in to get the oil or whatever in the area, they have to go through Yemen's ports. And right now that the rebellion group, they have taken over 2/3 of like most of those ports. And the economy of Yemen has basically like come to a standstill kind of. There's about, as you mentioned, there's about 24 million people in Yemen that need humanitarian assistance. About 80% of them like are below the poverty line right now. Like 10 million of them, like they barely have food for like the next day. There's among all this stuff, they had like an entire cholera outbreak that took out like about 2.6 million people were affected through it. And then with COVID coming through this year, like it's like they've been hit over and over and over again. And like it's come to a point where a lot of countries have gone in for assistance and they've pulled out. And the most recent article that I read, I think it was within like today or like 2 days ago, the UN is also pulling out soon with all like assistance. Trump had pulled out during his his time. So yeah, it's just a really bad situation.
Where do I even begin? Describe to me for those who, right now there's a lot going on in the world, and folks are trying to, they're dealing with the pandemic and how it affects them, affects their own job. A lot of folks are just here worried about, hey, how do I pay rent and stuff? So I guess keeping up to date on what other folks are going on in Yemen is pretty common. So if you can just tell me, what kind of conditions are the folks there living in?
I mean, if our conditions are, yeah, it's like if like imagine a bad condition for us. What would be a bad condition right now? Like during COVID pandemic or whatever. It's like, oh, we probably don't have bread or something like that. Like at home, like maybe our electricity goes down because of a storm hit, whatever. It's like, but over there's like millions of, like at least like 10 million people that don't even have a roof over their head. They get to drink water like once a day. Like but here's the thing. This has been going on for like about 6 years, or about more than 6 years or so. And we've been hearing about Yemen every single year. Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, I heard the same exact, during I think May or June, where like the whole wave of like people posting about Yemen online came to be. The same thing happened in 2019, same thing happened in 2018. And the same picture of a little boy trying to drink water, and he's like very malnourished. That same picture has been circulating on the internet for 3 years, saying that, oh, this boy is about to pass away in like 2 days or something like that. And like it's like creating like this momentum of like, we need to help Yemen, but then like nothing's happening at the same time. So it's like,
so what do you think? What do you would like to see happen? What needs to happen?
It's a very tough question, like, because it's like we have like, I'm just a dude, living in Atlanta making TikToks, but it's like we have no jurisdiction over what these people like want or need. But I think the main problem here is that I was talking about it on my live last night, is that we've abandoned people, like we've abandoned Yemen as if they are strangers to us. That's the problem. Like we abandoned our neighbors, we abandoned people because we think we're strangers. And that notion of we are strangers comes from some difference that we like, either we hate or we exploit. And in this case, like one of the main reasons why Middle East is the Middle East, like it's not, Middle East is a beautiful area. Like if you've been to like the right places right now, because right now like the like UAE and all that is the right places, but Middle East is a beautiful place, but it's been completely like neutralized through like military warfare. Like ever since like the 90s, like we've like America and like we've gone in and we've literally neutralized the area. So it's like, and that stems from Islamophobia. So it's like there's this entire like there's like these back ends of it that's like, why are we not helping Yemen? Right? We can. When France is in need, overnight we'll raise $1 billion, right? But when Yemen has been in need for 6 years, what are we doing? We've abandoned them as if they're our strangers. And where does that abandonment come from? There's this internalized like Islamophobia, or internalized hatred, or internalized strangerhood to them. What is that strangerhood? So it's like our problem, like I think it's a bigger problem. It's like we need to like figure out a way to like at least come together as one somehow, because we just keep forgetting that. Like we're all one. I don't know why we like, even nationalities are a weird thing to talk about. It's like, what? Canadian, American, bro? Yeah. Like that's just a drawing on a map saying that, hey, you live here and here. But in reality, you're just a human being. Like, you're a species. You're just another species living on Earth. Enjoy it. But no, we're gonna abandon our friends like they're strangers.
I think that's a great note to end on in terms of needing to reflect, needing to have empathy. I want to thank you, Darshan, for doing this. What is your TikTok handle that folks could follow you on?
Lil Bollywood.
I wanted you to say it, that's why. Lil Bollywood.
Oh,
okay, thank you so much, Darshan Patel, for joining me. Thank you for updating us.
Thank you for having me.
And we are coming to the end of the Peel Matters show here on Newstalk Saga 960 AM. We spoke about Venezuela, we spoke about India and the farmers, and Darshan just updated us on what's happening in Yemen and what continues to happen in Yemen. And he really puts it into perspective, I think, and that's for all of it. The entire discussion, I think, could be summed up is that I think we've lost sense of that connection. We've been othering folks. We've been putting them, different from us. And it's time we change that. We need to we need to get involved. And I always say at the end of my show. And that is the end of my show. So until next time, stay safe and get involved.